In this video, I will show you how to create, read, update and delete clients using Spring Boot, Thymeleaf, MySQL and Spring Data JPA. So to create a new client, we can click on this button. Then we need to fill this form. And to update the client details, we can use this button. So here we have the client details that we can update. And to delete a client, we can click on this delete button. So if we click on OK, the client will be deleted, and if we click on cancel, nothing will happen. Then in the next video, I will show you how to use OneToMany and ManyToOne relationships and how to upload and download files. So let's click on this button. And here we have the client details. We can create a new invoice. So let's click on this button and let's provide the file. We can select this file, then open, then submit. And here we have this new file. Let's add another invoice. And let's add another one. Then to download the invoice, we can click on this link. And we obtain this invoice that is already stored in the downloads folder of my computer. And to delete the invoice, we can click on this button. So if we click on cancel, nothing happens. And if we click on OK, the invoice will be deleted. You can find the link of the second video in the description. First, let's create a new Spring Boot application. So let's select Maven and Java. Let's select the latest version of Spring Boot. And then let's set the group ID. So we can call it com.bmt, for example. And then let's set the name of the application. We can call it Web App. Now let's add the dependencies. So first we need Spring Web. Then we need Thymeleaf. We will connect to MySQL database, so we need the MySQL driver. And we will connect to the database using Spring JPA. Also, we need to validate the submitted data, so we need the validation dependency. Now let's download the application, and I will save it on the desktop. Now let's extract this zip file and let's open it using an IDE. I will open it using Eclipse. Now let's configure the application to connect to the database. So let's go to the resources folder and let's open the file application.properties. Then let's add additional properties. So we need to add the driver class name, the URL of the database, so we will connect to this database, and of course we need to create it. So this is the username, I don't have any password. We can add this optional property to display the SQL queries on the console, and we need this property that allows us to update the database each time we update the entity models. Now let's create this database. So I will use MySQL that is available with XAMPP, and we can connect to MySQL using phpMyAdmin. So let's click on Admin. And using phpMyAdmin, we can create a new database. Let's call it DB5. Now this database is created successfully. So now let's create a new controller. So let's create a new class. Let's create it in the controllers package. And let's call it home controller. Let's annotate it with the controller annotation. Then let's create a new route. So we can create the root route that is accessible using the get method, and we can create this method that will return the file index.html. Let's add the required package. Then let's create this file. So we need to create it in the templates folder. So let's call it index.html. So I will create this application using Bootstrap. So let's go to the documentation website of Bootstrap. Let's go to the first link, then docs. Then let's copy this code that includes Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript from the CDN. Let's paste it here. Let's change the title of the window. So here we can write Client Manager. Then let's delete this h1 element. And let's replace it with this div, which is a Bootstrap container. We can add this h1 element with the text "Welcome to our website," so we can display this text in the center of the page. Then we can add this button, so it is a Bootstrap button that will take us to the client's route. Now let's save all the files and let's run the application. So let's go to the main file. We can make a right click, then run as, then Java application. Now the application is running correctly and it is available at this port number. So here let's write localhost colon 8080 and we obtain this page. Now let's create a new entity model that allows us to create the client's table in the database. So let's create a new class and let's create it in the models package. Let's call it client. So this class is an entity that allows us to create a table in the database. So we need to annotate it with the entity annotation. We can also add table that allows us to define the name of the table in the database. So we can create a table called clients. Let's add the required packages. Then let's add the required fields. So we need the client ID, which is the primary key and it is auto-incremental. We need the first name, the last name, the email address that should be unique. Also we need the phone number, the address, the states and the date. So the states can be either new or permanent or lead, and of course we have these two additional values. Now let's create the getters and setters. Let's select all the fields, then generate. Then let's create a JPA repository that allows us to read and write the clients in the database. So let's create a new interface. Let's create it in the repositories package. And let's call it client repository. Then let's extend the JPA repository. So we will extend the JPA repository. This is the name of the model, which is the client model, and this is the type of the primary key of the client model. So the type here is integer. Let's add the packages. So because the email address of the client is unique, let's define a new method that allows us to find clients by email address. So we can create this method, find by email. This is the email address and this is the owner of the email address. So this is all what we have to do in this repository because Spring JPA will implement this interface for us. Now let's save all the files and let's restart the application. So here we can see that the clients table has been created. Let's go to the database. So let's click on this database. And you can see that we have this new table. So for the moment it is empty. So let's add some clients in this table. We can click on SQL. Then here we can write the SQL query that allows us to populate the clients table. So we can add this query that allows us to add these clients to the clients table. Let's click on Go. And here we can see that 16 rows have been inserted. Now let's create a new controller that allows us to display the available clients. So let's create it in the controllers package. And let's call it clients controller. Let's annotate this class. So we need to add controller, and we can add request mapping that allows us to access to the different routes of this controller at the URL that starts with /clients. Let's add the required packages. We can delete the name of this annotation and let's replace it with star. Then let's request the client repository from the application. So we already created the client repository in the repositories package. So we can request it from the application using AutoWired. Then let's create a new route that allows us to display the available clients. So we can create this route. It will be accessible using the get method at the URL /clients or /clients/. We can create this method. It returns a string which is the name of the HTML file. So we will return the index.html file that is available in the clients folder. Of course, we don't have this file and we don't have this folder for the moment, and we need to create them. So in this method, we will read the available clients using our repository. So we will read all the clients, and also we can sort them by descending order of ID. Like this, we will display the newest clients first. Then we need to pass this list of clients to the page. So here we need to request a parameter of type model. Let's add the required package. And let's add this list to this model. Now the list of clients will be available to the page using the name clients. Now let's create this file. So let's create it in the templates folder. So first we need to create the clients folder. Then let's create the index file. So we can copy the source code of the first index file. Let's change the title of this page. So here we can write list of clients. Let's update this button. So let's update the URL. It will be /clients/create. And let's write new client. Then let's create a new table. So let's add this table. In the table head, we will add this row that contains these columns. So we will display the client ID, the name, the email address, phone number, the address, the states, the date, and then we have action. So in this column, we will display two buttons, the edit button and the delete button. And for the moment, the table body is empty. So for every client that we have in this clients list, we need to create a table row. So for every client that we have in the clients list, we will create a new table row. So here in the first cell, we will display the client ID. Then in the second cell, we will display the first name plus this space plus the last name. Then we will display the email address, the phone number, the address, the states. We will display the first 10 characters of the date. Then in the last cell, we will display two buttons. So this is the edit button and this is the delete button. So when we click on edit, we will go to the URL /clients/edit and we will add the client ID to the URL. And when we click on the delete button, we will display first this alert. So we will display the text, "Are you sure?" If the user clicks on OK, then we will go to the URL /clients/delete. And of course, we need to add the client ID to the URL. So here we can see that we have several warnings. We have undefined attribute name. So this is not an error, but we can fix it. So to delete this warning, we need to update the HTML tag. So here in the HTML tag, we need to add a new attribute. And now we can see that we don't have the warnings anymore. Now let's save all the files and let's restart the application. Let's click on Clients and we obtain this page. So here we have the list of clients, we have this button that should allow us to create a new client, and here we have the list of all the clients. So we can see that they are displayed in the descending order of ID, which means that we will display the newest clients first. Now I will show you how to create clients. So when we click on this button, for the moment we have this error, not found. So we need to create this route. So first let's create a new DTO model that should allow us to create new clients. Let's create it in the models package. And let's call it client DTO. Then let's add the different fields of this class. So we need the first name, which is required, and if we don't provide the first name we will obtain this error message. Then we need the last name, which is also required. We need the email address, which is required, and it should have the email address format. Then we need the phone number, which is optional. We need the address, which is also optional, and we need the states, which is required. Now let's add the required packages. Let's delete the name of this attribute and let's replace it with star. Then let's create the getters and setters. Then let's create a new route in clients controller. So this route will be accessible using the get method at the URL /clients/create. So we need to pass an object of type client DTO to the page because we need to associate it to the form. So now let's create this file in the clients folder. Let's copy the code from the first index file. Then let's delete the h1 element and the bottom. And let's replace them with this row that contains only one column that will be displayed in the center of the page. Also, we can add a rounded border to this column. Then we can display the title of the page, so we will display the text new client and we will display it in the center of the page. Then let's add the form. So we can create this form that will be submitted to the same URL using the post method, and we need to associate it to client DTO. So now let's create the first field of this form. So we can create this Bootstrap row that contains one label with the text first name. Then we have this div that contains this input field that is associated to the first name field of client DTO. So here we will display this paragraph only if we have an error related to the first name field of client DTO. So if we have an error, then we will display it using this Bootstrap class, which is the red color, and we will display the error related to the first name. Then let's add the other fields of this form. So we can add this row that contains a label with the text last name. Then we have this input field that is associated to last name of client DTO. And of course we will display this paragraph if we have a validation error related to the last name. Then we have this row that contains a label with the text email. The input field is associated to the email field of client DTO, and of course we have this paragraph for the validation errors. Then we have another row for the phone number, we have this row for the address. Then we have this row that contains a label with the text status, and then we have this select element. So this drop-down list will be associated to the states field of client DTO, and we have these options. So the states can be either new or permanent or lead or occasional or inactive. Then we have this row that contains two buttons. So in the first column we have the button submit, which allows us to submit the form, and we have this second column that contains this button, which is a link that allows us to go back to the list of clients. Let's save all the files. and let's restart the application. Let's refresh this page, and we obtain this form. So for the states, we can see that we have these options, and if we click on cancel, we have the list of clients. So now when we click on submit, we obtain this error. So we need to create the route/clients/create that will handle the post requests. So let's go to clients controller and let's create a new route. So let's create this route that will process post requests, and it allows us to create new clients. We can call this method create client. We need the submitted data, which is of type client DTO, and we need to add valid to be able to validate the submitted data. So the validation errors will be available in this object. And by default, this method will redirect the user to the list of clients. First, let's check if the submitted email address is already used or not. So we can call our repository.findByEmail, and we can provide it with the submitted email address that is available in client DTO. So if we have a client having this email address, this means that the email address is already used. So we can add an error to the result, and this error will be related to the email field of client DTO. So we will display the submitted email address, and this is the error message: email address is already used. Then let's check if we have other validation errors. So if we have validation errors, then we will display the create page again. Otherwise, we need to create a new client. So we can create a new object of type client. We will set the first name, last name, the email address, the phone number, the address, and the states using the submitted data of client DTO. And for the date, it will be the current date. Then we can call our repository to create this new client, and we can redirect the user to the list of clients. Let's save the file and let's restart the application. So let's create a new client. So let's submit the form as it is. And here we can see that we have validation errors. So let's fill the form. So we can keep the email address empty, then submit. So here we did not lose the submitted data, but we have the validation error related to the email address. So let's provide a valid email address, then submit. So here we can see that we have this new client and we are redirected to the list of clients. Now I will show you how to update the client details. So when we click on edit, we will send a request to /clients/edit, and we will add the client ID to the URL. So for the moment we have not found, so we need to create this route. So let's go to clients controller and let's create a new route. So let's create the route /clients/edit that is accessible using the get method. So we need the model that allows us to pass some data to the page, and we need the client ID that is available in the URL. So first let's read the client having this ID. So if client is null, then we can redirect the user to the list of clients. But if we find a client with this ID, then we need to create an object of client DTO that we will associate to the edit form. So we will initialize the data of client DTO using the data of the client object. Then we will pass the client and client DTO to the model. Like this, they will be accessible to the page. So now let's create the edit page. So this page will be very similar to the create page. So we can copy the source code from this page and let's add it here. Let's change the title of the page. So here we can write edit client. Then we need to display the client ID. So we can copy this row. In the label, let's write client ID. So this input field will be of type read only. Let's change the Bootstrap class. So we don't need to bind this input field to any field of client DTO, but we will use it to display the client ID that is available in the client object. So let's replace th field with th value. And here let's display the client ID that is available in the client object. And then we don't need this paragraph, so let's delete it. Also, we need to display the creation date, so let's copy this row and let's paste it after the states. So in the label, let's write created at. Then in the input field, let's display the date. So here we can write client.createdAt. Let's save all the files and let's restart the application. Let's refresh the page. So we obtain this form that is initialized with the client details. But for the moment, if we click on submit, we obtain this error. So now we need to create the route/clients/edit that will handle the post requests. So let's create this route/clients/edit that is accessible using the post method that allows us to update the client details. So we can create this method. We have the model that allows us to pass data to the page. We need to read the client ID from the URL. Then we need to read the submitted data, which is of type client DTO. So if we have any validation error, the errors will be displayed, will be available in the object result. By default, we will redirect the user to the list of clients. So first, let's read the client having this ID. So we can call our repository.findById, and this is the client ID. If client is null, then we will redirect the user to the list of clients because we don't have a client with this ID. Otherwise, if we found a client with this ID, then we can add this client to the model, and then we can check if we have validation errors or not. So if we have validation errors, then we will display the edit page with the validation errors. Otherwise, we need to update the client in the database. So we can set the first name, the last name, the email address, the phone number, the address, and the states of the current client using the submitted data that is available in client DTO. Then we need to use our repository to save the client details in the database. So we can add this try catch block. In the try block, we will call client repo.save and we will save the client details. But of course, it is possible that the submitted email address is already used. So if the email address is used, then this statement will throw an exception. And in this case, we can add an error to the result, which will be related to the email address. And you can display the error message, email address is already used. And we can display the edit page with the validation errors. Otherwise, if we saved the client details correctly in the database, then we will redirect the user to the list of clients. Now let's save all the files and let's restart the application. Now let's edit the details of this client, for example. So let's click on edit. So we obtain this form. So we can delete, for example, the first name. Let's click on submit. And you obtain this validation error. So let's provide the first name. Then let's update the email address, the phone number, and the states. Then submit. And here we can see that the email address, the phone number, and the states have been updated. Now I will show you how to delete clients. So when we click on this delete button, we obtain this alert, and if we click on OK, we will go to the URL/clients/delete and we will provide this URL with the client ID. So for the moment we have not found, so we need to create this route. So let's go to clients controller and let's create a new route. So let's create this route/clients/delete that is accessible using the get method. We need to read the client ID from the URL. Then we need to find a client having this ID. So if client is not null, this means that we have a client with this ID. In this case, we need to delete it. So we can call client repo, which is our repository.delete, and this is the client that we want to delete. Then we will redirect the user to the list of clients. Let's save the file and let's restart the application. Let's go back to the list of clients. So let's delete the client with the ID 16. So if we click on cancel, nothing happens. And if we click on OK, we can see that the client with the ID 16 has been deleted. In the next video, I will show you how to use colored badges and Bootstrap icons, how to use OneToMany and ManyToOne relationships, and how to upload and download files. You can find the video link in the description.